I will be jumping into the interview with Kayla Baretta right away here. I want you to pay attention to how we kind of rabbit trail in this podcast. And in this interview, we started talking about remote teams, which has a ton of value. We also discussed higher performing organizations, and what it really came down to, and this is really what the entire focus of this interview was really about communication. I'm not talking about active listening here. Active listening is communication training for those without any budget or people who don't really want to learn how to communicate well. It's obvious that Kayla has mastered this. She has become a master at communication in so many different ways, and that really helps her team. Has given her team an ability to perform much higher internally as well as with external clients and customers. This interview, I cut out a portion after thinking through this a little bit. I cut out a little portion when we were kind of supposedly off mic. It was just me thanking Kayla, but I wanted to leave it in. So after the outro, pay attention. I will have that left in this podcast as well, just because it was such a unique experience to spend a bit of time with Kayla and hear more where she's coming from and interview her specifically. Enjoy the show. Kayla Baretta, it is so good to spend a little bit of time with you and get to know you a little bit. We've had just a brief chat on the phone, and I am really looking forward to this interview in so many ways. To start off with, please introduce yourself and your background, how you found your way to where you are right now, as well as tell us about Paperleaf, the company that you work with.
Sure. As mentioned, my name is Kayla Baretta. I'm the current managing director at Paperleaf. We are a software design and development agency and user experience consultancy, which is a lot of words to say that we help companies solve user experience and technical challenges. And this can be everything from Concord Traits, which is an application that we built with Concord Consulting, to things like the Elections Alberta enumeration platform, which is where you go to register to vote if you live in Alberta. And we work on different things through government, post-secondary, and private institutions, just really trying to improve workflows with technology. And how I got here, I like to call my career a series of happy accidents. I entered tech kind of at a time where if you were just excited and ready to show up and do work, that you could. So I'm classically trained as a scientist. I worked in a lab. I quit working in a lab. I showed up one day at a website firm and was like, can I have a job? And they were like, sure. And that's kind of how I got started in tech. And it's been over a decade of working on different things online, like websites, mobile apps, web apps, and kind of everything in between. It's been a lot of fun.
That you just said so much, and I want to even jump into this a little bit. Maybe before I say that, if the listeners didn't catch that, and they love Traits and how Traits works as an app, as a website, Paperleaf is 100% to blame for how great it looks and for how well it works. Just go back a little bit. What are what is your bread and butter? What does your company do that somebody can come and go, oh yeah, I need that. That would be great to have.
Yeah. So we offer kind of two different lines of business, one being software design and development. So this is either taking an existing application and modernizing it, taking a business flow and working that into a digital setting. And for some companies, this is just some small parts of their business. And for some, it is their entire way that they run their business, including their financial reporting, their day-to-day, their operations. And then we run a user experience consultancy where we mostly work with post-secondary and government on helping them augment their teams to figure out how users are actually interacting with the platforms that they build and providing expertise in engaging with citizens and ratepayers.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to make sure that I get your contact information or any other links for our show notes later on, just before we finish this up.
Sure, sounds good.
Let's start with building remote teams. This is why Mike was like, you've got to chat with Kayla, because he's like, they are absolutely brilliant at building these remote teams. And I think that's something that's scary for a lot of companies. Again, that's not going to work for every company. A restaurant business cannot do that remotely in every way. But there are so many ways that we could utilize this in business and create, again, a higher performing organization that I don't think we are really making use of. So maybe start with how you figured out remote teams, how that process started for Paperleaf, and where you're at right now with it.
Yeah, like most companies, we went fully remote during COVID. So in March of 2020. And for us, it was just a case of making the choice to never return back to the office. So a combination of things kind of led to that decision. One was we realized that a large amount of our clients were starting to come from out of province and out of Edmonton. So our team was spending an increased amount of time in video calls, regardless of if they were in office or not. And the other was the tech market took a really challenging hit in trying to find employees around 2021, 2022. It was very difficult to hire. And for us, it was about the decision of how can we find the best person for this role at rates that we can afford, and continue to sustain them. And that might not be someone in our local market. And we have quite a few employees that are not in our local market. So that's where we kind of started. And in terms of building that culture and building what that looks like, for me, that's really around how do you take your current culture, if you're proud of it, obviously, and if you're excited about it, and create rituals and create moments where you can sustain that. So Paperleaf by default is a very collaborative, very empathetic culture. That's kind of how we've been for the last 15 years. So when we went remote, it was about creating those moments of collaboration, both synchronously, or asynchronously, which means you're in a call or you're typing or something like that. And still creating the opportunities for empathy, which is so important both in our work, working with users, driving the right products, working with clients, and in how we treat each other. So,
when you say empathy, what do you mean specifically? Because I think empathy is overused a little bit in our culture, and I think people mean different things by it. So explain that a little bit.
Sure. So for me, empathy is really around caring deeply. And caring deeply is also one of Paperleaf's values. And what this means is that you care an incredible amount about the people that you work with. So that's like yesterday, someone was 15 minutes later than they usually check in. We're remote. People start at all different times, but people have like habits, right? And I started getting messages of like, do you know where this person is? We're really concerned that they're okay. And I'm like, they're probably fine. They're probably just running late. It's okay. So that kind of side of driving a culture where people care about each other. And then the other side of that being like care about what they produce. So we look for people that produce high quality work, that want to produce high quality work, and that want to produce the right things for our clients. So there's a lot of agencies that you'll show up and be like, I want this thing. And they'll be like, sure, that's $300,000. And you build that. And we don't really operate like that. We go, okay, why do you want to build this thing? Tell me about the business problems you're facing. Is this the right solution? And sometimes the right solution is a off-the-shelf platform that you pay $1,000 for a year. And sometimes the right solution is us building something custom and complex. And sometimes it lives somewhere in between. So really just trying to care about our clients' businesses and getting them the right outcomes versus just looking for money.
What you call empathy, I tend to, in my own life, and I'm not saying anything's right or wrong here, in my own life, I call this curiosity. And maybe I should call it empathetic curiosity, because I believe that when I'm asking questions, when I'm actually curious about somebody else, whether they're a colleague or an employee or a customer or client, when I get into that and I'm willing to care and ask questions, I learn so much more, and I end up being able to produce something far better that really clearly meets the needs, rather than saying, oh, you do this and I give either A, B, or C off the menu, you get a C, just because I have A, B, or C. That's such a completely different view of taking care of people around you, as well as taking care of your end users, right? I love that idea. Okay. I'm going to go back to something you said a couple minutes ago. You talked about building remotely and where you're all over the place. Give us a little bit of context there. Where are all the people that work with Maple Leaf?
Mhm. Yeah, the majority of my people are in Western Canada. So we have quite a few people in Alberta and BC. And then I have one employee in Michigan currently. But whenever we hire, we open to Canada-wide, and some positions will open to the US as well.
Okay, I want to go through some of the journey here.
Yeah.
What were some of the biggest hurdles you faced as you were building this remote team?
Um, I think interestingly, we were set up to really thrive in remote because we already operated on a team basis. So within Paperleaf, people work in teams or pods. So a typical team is a designer, three developers, and a project manager. There's different iterations of these, but that's kind of what it is. And a lot of project management or some management philosophies kind of center on this thing of people having personal connection, and that personal connection stops being possible outside of the two pizza team is what I've called it. If you can't feed the team with two pizzas, you've lost that personal connection. So eight kind of being the max of that. And we already had that format. So we already worked in teams. So people still have these deeply personal connections on their team, which they meet with their team at a minimum twice a week. They have a resourcing meeting and they have what we call a retrospective um, every week. So they were already able to kind of build these personal connections, at least within their team, which helps a lot. And then we added in different elements to really help sustain that along the way. So we have quite a large management practice where we're doing things like one-on-ones, performance management on a regular basis, weekly updates, engagement surveys, all kinds of things like that to keep culture and health and kind of that relationship between management and ICs. Every second week, we have what's called an all hands meeting where we just go over like our celebration moments, the state of the company, things like that. In addition to kind of like the larger quarterly meetings where we actually go through how the quarter went, our financials, things like, and those kind of details. And then to encourage sharing across teams, different practice areas. So I talked about development. They meet most of them meet on a monthly basis, some of them every 2 weeks, to talk about like trends that are happening and things they're seeing or interesting things that happened in their projects so that they're able to share knowledge and learning. And that's really like about the work. Then we have like fun cultural things. And with any remote team, you need to bring your team together. We do twice a year where we bring our team together, usually in the summer and then in for the holidays. Um, and then we do this thing called Leafy Games. It happens in the spring, which is a series of online contests, more or less, where the crowning jewel activity is a photo scavenger hunt where people have to go and take pictures of themselves with stuff. And it always gets more ridiculous every year. Not so much the items you have to find, but the pictures that people take of themselves. So yeah, that's just these fun little ways to both incorporate those moments of fun into the workday and also get work done too.
On those, I think you said 2 times a year, summer, winter, when you're
Mhm.
getting everyone together, that's the entire company comes to one location?
Yes, yeah, we bring them all to Edmonton.
It's fascinating to hear all the different ways we can be creative and find ways to connect. And I'm going to share a little bit of a story. I told you before the call that my background psychology. When I was a therapist, I heard about telephone therapy and I was like, this is the greatest scam of all time. And so, because I was taught that when you're sitting close to a person, I can watch their entire body. I can see whether their foot is tapping, or I can see whether they're twitching. I can see when they're saying something. Those that body language is extremely important to pay attention to as a therapist. I was paying attention to all these things, and I thought, this is absolute trash. You cannot do phone therapy and get anything from it because I'm not paying attention in the same ways. And I actually found the opposite was true. As soon as I had a few sessions where I experimented with it, what I found was I started paying attention to different things. I started paying attention to different inflections in somebody's voice. And we all know this. You can tell when somebody is out of breath. You can tell when somebody
Yeah.
is walking around the room. You can tell when somebody's smiling on the phone. We can tell those things. So in my experience, as soon as I started to pay attention to different aspects, or open different senses to the experience, I actually became really good at paying attention to these other things. Have you found that? Is that accurate? Am I speaking of in a weird way? What are your
I think in some ways it's accurate, and in other ways, remote, and I find the people that are most successful at remote are the people that are comfortable asking questions that might feel hard. So there's been moments where we're talking to a client, and you're right, like the tone of their voice changes, or they start using certain words, and I go, "Hey, are we good? Like, are you feeling frustrated? Is there something here that we need to explore more?" Um, and I think that that happens a lot more when we're remote because we have to take those moments to resolve it or it goes away. We use Slack, which is a messaging platform similar to like Teams or some other tools that people might use. And there's times where things get written and you're like, okay, what does this mean? Does this mean you're upset with this? Is this just you reporting on this? And I always tell our team, just ask. Like the worst thing that someone's going to say is, no, I'm good. And otherwise, you find something and you get to open that up and figure it out how you move forward together.
It's funny. I don't know if this is a Canadian thing or not. We are so polite and so, I think, as a culture, unwilling to
Mm.
ask that question because we think it might be uncomfortable. I lived in China for 8 years where you would never ask a question if you thought it might cause discomfort for somebody else. But again, going back to what you said, this practicing kind of that curiosity and empathy, when you're asking the right questions, it actually opens things up for somebody to share what's actually going on in their mind instead of smoothing it over and it actually becoming far more uncomfortable later on. It's funny, I had a roommate once. This guy was, I call him One-Eyed Dave. He was this brilliant human being, definitely the smartest human being I've ever met. We were roommates together, and he had a wonky eye. He had kind of a dead eye that just didn't follow along with the other eye. And as soon as I met him, he said, "Hi, I'm Dave." I said, "Hi, I'm Mark." I said, "What happened to your eye?" First thing. And I think that is probably uncomfortable for a lot of people. For him, he almost gave this sigh of relief and he said, "Thank you so much for asking." He said, "So much of the time, I know somebody for like months and people are just kind of awkward. Which eye do I look in?" And it creates all this anxiety for both of us when if they just asked right off the bat, I tell them, then it's done and we move on with life. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
I guess so.
You don't have too
Yeah,
many
I
one-eyed Dave
think
friends?
no, I don't have too many One Day Day friends. I think I think that's more or less right. Like really just addressing any potential elephants in the room, not just the obvious elephants.
Take care of it, move on with what we need to discuss, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that is exactly what we need to discuss, the elephant. So we can camp there for a little bit too.
And
Brilliant.
sometimes there's this thing where people have created stories in their head, or I'm telling myself a story, and we just need to realign on what the facts are together so
Yeah.
then we can move forward.
Perfect. I love this. All right. I asked you some of the difficulties or hurdles to building a remote team. You talked about culture. You talked about building these pods. And I'm going to talk maybe in the outro after I record this session about some of the great research on perfect small group sizes because you're dead
Yeah.
right. It's kind of like
Yeah.
that 6 to 10 or even 4 to 12 mark, but eight is right in the middle of that. What other hurdles have you guys experienced as teams that have just been you've had to figure out as you go?
Yeah. I think one thing is that remote is not for everyone. So we have had employees in the past where there was like a notable decrease in their mental health, or they just has struggled kind of with work-life balance and how to create space or create moments where they could separate themselves from work. And there is a ton of research about that, like having a dedicated space or rituals and other things that kind of help you with that. And then the other thing really is around how you onboard people and train people, especially if they don't have experience in the industry. So I do find it's quite a lot easier if someone is intermediate or experienced to bring them onto a remote team. You basically are providing them setting orientation of like, this is how we do things in our business, but they know how to write code or they know how to develop a content strategy. They know how to do the nuts and bolts of the work. It's more like, how do you do it? And how do I adapt what I already know there? Versus when you bring someone in from out of school, they sometimes don't even know how to go to work. So there is some conversations or training that has to happen there that we learned kind of the hard way to get people oriented and onto teams. And I still think this is a little bit of a challenge for us. It becomes a challenge in service industries where every hour is how you make money. It's hard to have new people and train them. But what we did do, we've had some interns in the last year where we created really structured programs for them and kind of had daily check-ins with what they're working on and where their work's at and things like that to kind of help facilitate that in different ways.
We've been talking a lot about the hurdles.
Mhm.
What about some of the benefits? What are the greatest benefits been for your company as you've gone through this process?
I think being remote has greatly increased our diversity, which as a tech company can be challenging. Um, Over half of my staff is women, over half of our leadership is women. We have a significant amount of employees who are parents. And all of this kind of adds to the culture and experiences that your group has. And being able to offer that as basically a perk of working here um, means that we don't always have to compete at the top margin of the salary bands as well. So that helps a lot for us. Like I mentioned, we have a flexible work environment. So I start work at 7:30. Some people start work at 10 a.m. my time. And to me, that doesn't really matter. What matters is they get the work done. And it's quite for us, we have a lot of tangible outputs. It's like you've produced code. Is it good? Yes, no. Is it on time? So I find it isn't a challenge to measure is the work getting done and is it getting done to how we want? And on the management level, we have scorecards and other things in place to track key metrics on a weekly basis to make sure that things are happening. Because I think a lot of the argument against remote work is this idea that, oh, are people really working? And it's like, well, if you don't know if your people are really working based on what they produce, you have a bigger problem than remote work.
Yeah, those KPIs will make so much of a difference because you can measure it. And if somebody is getting done just an astronomical amount in a small amount of time and has a little bit extra time in their day, it's probably not seen as a big problem, correct?
No, no, it wouldn't be. I think we always have more work than we have time, but um, like most employees at Paperleaf work about 34 hours a week. I'm good with that. It's what they need to get the work done.
I'm thinking about a lot of other companies right now. And I'm
Mhm.
thinking about listeners coming on, kind of devil's advocate here, saying, well, yeah, you're a tech company. I mean, that makes sense. You can do that. What would you say to them? Maybe some tips of certain positions or companies you go, you know what? You might want to think about this because there are some opportunities here. Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, one of the things that I see quite a bit is are your employees already sitting in virtual calls most of the day? Because if they are, why are you paying for an office space to do that in? Um, because that's a big thing I've seen a lot is people return to the office and then they're still on a call with people from all over the world or even people in their own city because their clients aren't there or something else like that. Um, and how much of your work requires you to work in focus time? Remote is great for that. It really helps promote an environment where you have minimal distractions if you want it to. Um, and so I look more at the position versus can an industry do this? Because obviously you could have something like a roofing company where your roofers still have to go and build a roof, but do your accountants, do the people that schedule the work, all of that? What are your systems and processes in place where they could go home tomorrow and do that job and do it effectively still? Yeah.
Okay, perfect. When it comes to, again, keeping in touch with your staff, you've talked about these pods, you've talked about creating different events and different ways to connect. Those sound, I'm not going to say formal, but those are kind of set as dates, like we're going to do this here, we're going to do this there. What are other ways that you connect in an empathetic way with your pods and in people around you, just to check in with people? What are ways you found are good that way?
Hmm. We're at a good size. So we're at 32. So I still know everyone. Um, I'm starting to get to the point where I might not know their pets' names, but I still know everyone. Um, and I think that leaders, it's so important for you to take moments and acknowledge people or acknowledge things that are happening. So when I hear one of my managers or directors tell me, oh, hey, this person's doing a great job, I make sure that I shout that person out. I make sure I write, I'm like, hey, I heard that you're doing so great on this. Or like, hey, I saw this thing and it was awesome. Um, and also the other way, when people are going through really challenging times of, hey, the work's really busy, or maybe they lost a family member or something like that, reaching out and being like, hey, is there some way we can support you? Is there something we can do to help you here? Is there something that's missing? So still really maintaining that really human part. And then we have a ton of fun things that are more organic that happened, like there's a food Slack channel where people just talk about stuff they're making and eating. There is a gardens one. There's one called Fit Friends, which is where people talk about all of the physical activity that I am definitely not doing. And just all kinds of different things where people are able to share and really experience each other. Are probably our most busy channels are our kids channels. People post pictures of their kids. We have a separate channel because some people are like, I don't care about your children, and that's okay. And we also have a pets channel that are very busy. Lots of pictures of dogs and cats and birds and ferrets and all kinds of things. They really just keep things human and give people these kind of micro moments of connection.
This is fascinating because my guess is that in physical environments where people are coming to an office and working together, you might see some pictures on somebody's desk. You might see some of other aspects of life come in, but for the most part, we're probably not going very deep with others. My guess, from what you're saying, is that you guys have again been forced in some ways to figure this out, and in figuring that out, you know far more about each other than maybe the average people would in a business. Do you think that's correct?
I think in some ways, yeah.
Do
I
you
think that some of the rituals we put in place, things like one-on-ones and some different feedback mechanisms and stuff, have really allowed that to shine. And then even when you were talking, I thought about there's this thing that no one, I don't even know how it started, but when people go on vacation, they post pictures in like one of our general channels as soon as they get back. And it's not no one asks them to do it. There's nothing. It's just like become a cultural habit where it's like, oh, I went away. So here's the things that I did. And there's that sharing moment.
that allows people to naturally ask questions and think through with that, right?
Yeah.
Practice empathy in other ways. Okay, let's jump into strategic planning and insights as a leader that builds an organization. What are your thoughts on strategic planning in general? How do you guys practice this at Paperleaf?
Yeah, so we use the entrepreneurial operating system or EOS. So we do an annual strategic planning and then quarterly meetings. And in between there, we're running, EOS calls it an L10. It's a 90-minute leadership meeting once a week, and our weekly scorecards to kind of keep things on track. So that's kind of how we approach it on a high level. So mostly using EOS frameworks. This allows things to be kept pretty tight, but still move along issues and move along goals that we have as a business.
I think that I have come across certain organizations that have strat plans that everyone understands. Everyone has been maybe part of it. They've maybe given some input. They know exactly
Mm.
what's involved. And I come across other companies that is a very top-down approach. The leader comes and says, "This is what we're doing." Maybe doesn't even explain why. How important is it for everyone to be involved in something like that?
Hmm. I think that there's a healthy balance. So we do strategic planning with leadership and management together. We don't involve every contributor in the organization. Um, And for us, that's really around setting that high level direction and where we think the company could be going. But that is communicated transparently we go over where we're at, what we're doing, how we're doing every quarter. And I think that communication piece is so important for people to understand where we're going and how we get there and why it is important. And then, like I mentioned, we provide a lot of venues for people to ask questions, seek confirmation, seek understanding on that. Um, and some departments will have their own individual goals that they work with the people in that department as well.
That was actually, you covered the next question that I was going to ask, which is what are some of the disadvantages of having everyone part of this? You talked about it's a leadership team. Not every single person has their fingertips on everything or fingerprints on everything, which
Yeah,
again, I appreciate that.
I
All right.
find that some aspects, like sometimes when there's too many people involved, you get this too many cooks in the kitchen, or you get this thing where you get into a place where you're trying to consensus seek, and at moments that isn't effective for driving the business forward, because you're always going to get a different mix of people, some who are a little bit more risk taking, some who are not as risk taking, or risk averse, and it just creates opportunity for stagnation, which isn't really possible in the tech industry. If you aren't changing, if you aren't moving forward, if you aren't advancing, then you aren't going to be a company in a few years. So that's why we've kind of chosen to separate that as a leadership activity and then being really clear and transparent about how that gets communicated and the why and the value of it.
We've been talking about strategic planning a little bit. What is a key insight or the key insight you have as a leader that helps build higher performing organizations in general?
I think for me, that's probably Brene Brown said, clear is kind. And that's a mantra that I really hold on to and one that I've tried to translate throughout our team. Um, Providing as clear communication and expectation and feedback as we can for people, and really making sure that we're on the same page um, as much as possible is really the the most kind thing you can do.
Checking in with people, asking those questions, practicing curiosity, which is something
Yeah.
I love about Brene Brown. That's what you're talking about
Yeah,
right
but
now.
also being willing to set the expectation, being willing to say when something isn't um, working or isn't happening, um, and being able to explain why. Because I think that's equally as important. I think we always lean too much on this, like trying to be really good communicators who give really fair feedback and are kind and empathetic. But really, part of being kind is also being able to say, hey, what you said there wasn't appropriate. And here's why. Or, hey, this isn't actually living up to our quality. Here's how we can fix it. And here's how I'm going to help you and support you to do that.
Let's jump into this a little bit because
Yeah.
communication is again a word that we use a lot in our culture. It's something everyone believes is a good idea. I'm not, but I think my gut tells me that the average person who hears communication goes, am I actively listening? Am I being respectful? And that's kind of probably where it ends for a lot of people. You've been talking about empathy. You've been talking about Brene Brown, who goes into so much more depth than what we're going into right now about communication. What do you believe helps your organization when it comes to that? Because so much of the time, again, this is coming back to something we talked about at the beginning, which was we're afraid to offend somebody. We're afraid to set up boundaries. We're afraid to do those things. How do we do that in a way that adds value to a relationship rather than destroys relationship or puts people on guard?
I think what you reminded me of is I think everyone's been a part of a friend group where they didn't know where they stood. Where they were like, does that person actually like me? Are they just sassy? I don't really know. And when I think about that in the work context or even in life context, like, wouldn't it be easier if we all just knew where we stood? If we all just knew what that expectation was, or if we were meeting it, or if that was a relationship we should put energy into or not. Um, so when I think about communication, for me, coming back to that clear is kind and kind is clear kind of thing, it's are we laying it out? Are we providing um, where we stand, both from a client side and both on that? Um, And part of that is, have we really set a clear agreement that people can meet? It doesn't make sense where the expectation is. Do we both understand what that is and are coming to a good place? With with I think any business, but with remote especially, um, you have to be willing to over communicate and you have to be willing to ask for clarification because you're not going to have that chance encounter at the water cooler where you are able to clarify it or be like, hey, I don't really like what that person said. What do you think about it? It's more like I said earlier, hey, I don't really think that what you said was appropriate. Here's how we can move forward, right?
You're bringing up another point, which is bravery. And it takes bravery to have clear communication, to have good communication, to step outside of that comfort zone of saying, I'm just not going to say anything right now. I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm not going to ask about Dave's eye. I'm not going to, whatever it is. I'm not going to bring up that thing that felt a little uncomfortable and I'm not sure about. And I'm afraid that if I bring it up, I'm going to be looked as weak. Like all those questions can go on in our minds. Bravery is a big point of good communication. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we just going back to Beverly values again, we have one that calls says the right thing even when it's hard. It's a mouthful value. But I think that that is something that's so important because even there are times when someone is just building the wrong thing or building it in a way that doesn't solve a business problem. And someone else has to be like, hey, I don't know if that makes sense. Let's talk about it. Um, and that's something that we really try to encourage and actively try to hire for is um, that balance of do you say things even when it's hard and how do we reward that and how do we move people forward with that but also how do you get people that care deeply because sometimes those contradict a little bit sometimes.
You've talked about clear is kind. I think about
Hmm.
how kind it is to instead of allowing somebody to go talk about something for 20 minutes when they've already gone down the wrong road, to stop them right now in a generous, kind way and say, hey, you're going down the wrong path. Let's get back
Hmm.
on in focus. How much more embarrassing is it? How much more difficult is it realizing, oh, everyone was on the same page. I was on the wrong page for the last 15 minutes as I was talking. That's far more embarrassing than being called out by somebody who cares about you, knows they know all about your dog and about what you ate and when you took your last trip back and all these other things that you've been building into culture with compassion and empathy. If somebody stops me there and I trust them, it's going to be far easier to go, oh, yeah, yeah, let's just move on.
And it's far easier to ask for help too.
Yes, yes. It's funny. I think that my three greatest teachers in communication and in being this idea of being brave have been my kids, my wife, and my employees, my work team. In these three situations, I've had to learn constantly to do the right thing early on. And to me, the right thing, I think, aligns with what you've been talking about, Kayla, is what is kind, not even just for this moment, but also long term for this person. Am I going to let this person struggle along for the next 5 months before we part ways, or do we need to have a conversation right now and maybe find another solution, or we part ways right now? That, to me,
Yeah.
that's far kinder than just letting something go for a long time. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I think that there's a lot of kindness in knowing if someone isn't the right fit and how you address that. And also that as a small business, you can't be everything to everyone forever. I can't have 32 managers at Paperleaf, or only 32 people. So I think about that a lot too and we've had that conversation with several staff where it's like, it's okay for you to decide that this is the end of your journey and we can help you with that. We can refer you to people, we can be references, and that can be a really positive experience for everyone. And on the flip side of that, when people aren't performing in their role and they're working in a high performing team, they feel it and everyone else feels it. And I do think it is a kindness to have tough conversations about either how we support them to get to the level that they need or how they should move on. And that we've had really good experiences with laying people off and then them kind of landing almost their dream job in the next experience. I wouldn't say every time, but that's it's always nice to see that really has created the opportunity for them to find something different that they're much more suited for.
It's funny, coming into this conversation, I didn't think we would rabbit trail down communication and talk about communication a lot. And yet it makes sense. When we're talking about remote work, it makes sense that communication has to come up. It has to be a topic that we're going to discuss and go deep into because it has to be taken care of.
Yeah. And it's where silence happens is where miscommunication happens in remote. So, and that's even with clients, right? Because we are a client serving industry, and a client serving company. When whenever we've had a complaint, it's usually that there's a miscommunication, we were not aligned on what the expectations were, or we just stopped communicating for some reason. And really, that over communication piece comes back into play here, where over communication is the baseline of what needs to happen.
Beautifully said. Kayla, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about Paperleaf a little bit here before we go. But I
Sure.
want to share my experience of doing this interview with you. I love interviewing. It's something that I've never had an interview that I don't enjoy. But this has been unique. Usually, again, there's in our interview today, there have been a number of times where you've stopped me and asked for clarification. There have been a number of times where we just haven't gone with the flow just for the sake of going with the flow. And I believe what I've experienced in interviewing you is what your team's experience with you as well, where you're willing to go a little bit deeper. You're willing to stop. You're willing to ask an extra question. You're willing to do those things. Do I have that right?
I hope so.
I believe I
I
have
mean,
it right.
I really think that's part of working because we end up working with users so much. It was funny when you started talking about this before we started the interview, and you were like, oh, we might rabbit trail if there's something interesting, or we might go off. And I'm like, this is what happens when you interview a user, because you come in with this set amount of here's the questions and here's how I think your experience is. And then they say something like, actually, I managed my whole business in a spreadsheet and I just use this software to fill out forms. And you're like, well, tell me about this spreadsheet. And we go on this totally different track where we uncover so many interesting things. So I feel like I'm a user in a user interview right now, I
Well, thank you for this experience that you've given me because it's been an absolute delight to interview. Now, when we talk about Paperleaf and links or other ways that people can connect, what are the best ways for people to connect with you and your company?
Sure. Our website is paper-leaf.com. You can learn all about us and some of the work that we do there. With me personally, the only place I'm really active is on LinkedIn. If you followed me on Instagram, you just see pictures of cats. That's it. That's the truth. But from a business side, we also are on Instagram and LinkedIn as Paperleaf, so you can find us there.
Perfect. I will definitely include those links in the show notes. Is there anything else that you want to, and it's okay to say no to this, is there anything else you want to leave people if they are thinking about trying this remote thing with some people?
I think the biggest thing is to not be afraid to try, and to communicate to your team really clearly if it is an experiment or not. Like, hey, we're going to try this thing for the next month and see how it goes and see what the benefits and negatives are. And understand that if it's not working for you, that you can always make the decision to change that.
Thank you for this time, Kayla.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. This was fun.
Another really fun interview to conduct here. I am so enjoying the guests that we have on this podcast. By the way, just a quick shout out to the owner of Concord Consulting. He is the one who has been putting all of these interviews together so far as I continue to develop my network with businesses. He is really connected with so many businesses in and around Alberta, in Canada. He's got good connections in Australia and the US as well as Romania. So this has been a lot of fun. Thank you, Mike Murrow. Now, a few things to discuss here that cannot leave my brain before I get it out to you. One is just really quickly, the 3 biggest tips that came together, I guess 4 biggest tips. Number 1, practice empathetic curiosity. As we practice empathetic curiosity, we get to know people better, we meet their needs better. Secondly, Kayla talked about creating 2 pizza teams, so those pods. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, expand on this a little bit more. Thirdly, there are so many unique ways to bring people together, and Kayla shared some of those. Lastly, we really got into communication on a deeper level. My hope is that if only one thing comes out of this podcast, this interview, it's really that focus on communication and how valuable the information was that Kayla was providing to everyone here. A huge thank you again to Kayla for doing this. Okay, I talked about 2 pizza teams, or those pods that Kayla was talking about. She talked about 8-person teams being kind of the ideal. I have done a ridiculous amount of research into this because I worked with small groups. For years as I was practicing psychology, what I found out is, again, the smallest group sizes are right around 6 people. Under 6 people, when one person is not there, it leaves almost too much of a hole. There's too much empty space, time to fill with conversation or whatever it is. Under 6 people, teams tend to break down because they're so small. Teams over 12 people, and 12 is the absolute max that I found in all the research. When it comes to pods, or it comes to groups of people that are communicating really well together, teams over 12 people tends to be way too big. Even 11 or 12 people can be really big. So that number 8 that she was talking about really tends to be the sweet spot when it comes to a pod or those, I love the term that she mentioned, 2 pizza teams. When it comes to communication, which is another one of her tips, another thing that we focused on a lot, she mentioned Brené Brown. And if you don't know about Brené Brown, if you have not engaged with the work that she does, she is, in my understanding from what I've read, she is the foremost authority on shame and communication generally on the planet right now. She has been really, really, really universally acknowledged as a leader in this. And that is a comment that she makes all the time, is clear as kind. This idea has been bouncing around in my brain for the last few days since I recorded this interview. Clear is kind. And it will continue to challenge me as I desire to become a better owner, a better colleague, a better manager of people, a better husband, dad, a better friend. This is so important to me. Lastly, just before I go, please take a look at the links below in this podcast and the show notes, just to connect with Kayla or connect with Paperleaf in any way. If you can use their services and receive some of the benefits of all the work that they've done internally as an organization, that would be fantastic. Kayla mentioned EOS. And this is a theme that's coming up more and more as we do different interviews, that strategic planning is essential for business. Now, EOS is one method. I know that Concord Consulting does a phenomenal job. I've been sitting in on different strat planning sessions that Concord Consulting does, and they go much deeper, I would say, than any other practice of strat planning that I've seen. Far deeper. Because of that, they end up hitting far more benchmarks to help organizations grow or clean up or do org redesigns or whatever they need to do, or say simply get refocused on what they need to make sure their business is doing what it needs to for the owners and for the community that it is building around itself. So if you are interested in strat planning and understanding more of what it is, I might do a podcast with Mike, because Mike Moreau is fantastic. He understands this stuff, and he will be able to clarify what a difference this has made in the businesses that he's worked with for years and years and years. Thank you so much for listening. This is a delight for me to engage with people, to hang out with people, and to potentially help you in different ways. Before I sign off, really quickly, if you are curious about just that short blip of conversation we had kind of off mic afterwards, stick around, you'll hear it right away. So I was not putting up a front at all there. It is very unique interviewing you compared to everyone else that I've interviewed.
Again, thanks.
every interview is different. And again, not good or bad here, just different. But I think most people's favorite conversations are when they feel heard and understood. Not because the other person has done something magical or contributed in information, but because they've allowed space for somebody. And it's funny because this interview was really about you and what you can offer, and yet there were times where I felt very heard by you, Kayla. It was very sincere what I was saying there. That, well, maybe sincere is the right word. You are a sincere human being, and you come across that way so easily, and it makes the experience very, very unique to have a conversation with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very kind.